right, joining us from her hotel out in Chicago as she's been attending all of the events over there at the convention. She's the executive director over at the Texas Signal. You can check them out at texassignal.com. My friend Jessica Montoya Coggins. Jess, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, I'm so glad you were able to join us. It sucks that Nick and I weren't able to come out for the convention, with some scheduling conflicts that happened. But I've been following you. Obviously, we follow each other on social media, so I know of some of the videos of that you've been posting and some of the events you've been attending. Can you kind of take our audience a little bit inside the mood 7 weeks ago? Jess, was way different in on the Democratic side, and now to what it's like in Chicago. What are you hearing? What are some of the sentiments you're getting out there?
Yeah. The sentiments have really changed. I've just encountered a lot of people that seem very happy. They're very jubilant. You hear that word joyful being used a lot. I think that's something that, former President Trump has used to mock Kamala Harris for her laugh, but people just seem to be in really great spirits. I think the state roll call was like a really indicative thing of that. That is normally a very staid, very boring, a relic really from some of our earliest sort of traditions as a democracy. But that turned into, you had Lil Jon there, you had Sean Astin, you had and then some very poignant moments, for these states. So it's been a definitely though a very hectic number of days. There's been a lot of events. I think because people have this excitement, there was a lot of people change their schedules around to try and make it to Chicago. You had organizations that wanted to have more of a presence here. So all in all, I would say the atmosphere has been very joyful.
Well, that's good to hear that the vibes are good, right? As the kids would say out there. I did want to ask you because, like I said, I know you have heard a couple people not only speak at the convention, but you've seen them speak in person. I know you were at an event with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, and so I want to get your thoughts on some of that. But of the speeches so far this week, I got a text message from a friend of mine that's like, "Can we talk about policy?" And my answer to him was Hulk Hogan talking about policy because a lot of this is performance driven, as you know, Jess, like giving a big speech in front of a crowd. You want to give a message of what the party is standing for going forward. So what have been some of your takeaways from the speeches that you have heard? Who has stood out to you?
Yeah, there's been a couple of speeches that I think have been really good. I'm from Texas, so I will have to give a shout out to our Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. I think she did a really good job on Monday night. She had been a surrogate for Joe Biden. Now she is very enthusiastically, using her vocal prowess for Vice President Kamala Harris. Some people might have been a little familiar with her. She had a bit of a verbal takedown with Marjorie Taylor Greene a couple months ago in Congress. And she really, brought the case about, Vice President Harris being a former prosecutor and how that is going to really, play into how she runs against somebody who is a convicted felon. She also told a very poignant story about her own experiences with the vice president, going to her residence, maybe feeling, she wasn't necessarily sure she wanted to be in Congress. Was this the right place for her? And the vice president, very much telling her, like, no, you are needed here. And so I think that was very moving. Also with the Texas Signal, we really focus a lot on reproductive rights. That has certainly been a major theme throughout this convention. On Monday night, there were four speakers who talked about their experiences with living under Trump abortion bans. One of those was a woman from Texas and her husband. She went into septic shock because she was not able to receive treatment in time. You also had a woman from Louisiana who had to leave her state, and a young woman from Kentucky who had been raped by her stepfather. And if that had happened, after the Dobbs decision, things would have been different for her. So these were a lot of like these very personal stories that were coming and talking about really the consequences of what can endure. There's also been a lot of talk about Project 2025. You've had several speakers, including on Wednesday night, Kenan Thompson from SNL, bringing out this like behemoth book to really show, what is in there, which includes, really defining the family as between one almost stay-at-home mom and a working dad, you know, possibly, you know, eliminating IVF if, should Trump take a second term, you know, and abolishing the Department of Education.
Yeah, I'm so glad you touched on the women that spoke about the abortion stuff. And I know you have a great article up at the texassignal.com about the Texas women that were denied abortions to treat it at the topic pregnancies. Boo, say that five times fast there, Jess. So, it's funny because Representative Crockett's been on this show, friend of the pod. I was texting with her after her speech on Tuesday just to congratulate her because I do think, again, part of it is this performance, but also part of it is delivering this message of future going forward. And you're hearing the we're not going back chants that are coming out of this. And it's interesting too, because Representative Crockett was very, like you said, Biden surrogate and was like, guys, this is the candidate. If you're going to lose me, if we're going to pivot, are you surprised because in 7 weeks, Dems have pivoted and rallied around Kamala Harris. And now the ascension of, we heard last night, Governor Walz's speech. You're a lifelong Democrat. Like, are you shocked at how the party was able to rally so fast around Harris Walz? And what do you make of both of them and Walz's speech last night?
Sure. You know, I think that I actually think this goes a lot to the way that Joe Biden handled this. You know, there had been a lot of talk, you know, in that interim after that debate performance to, you know, in those 3 weeks about what was going to happen. I think many people were very fearful of a contested convention, you know, something that I think would have actually been very chaotic. And I think that the way that Joe Biden, you know, bowed out of this and very much enthusiastically supported Kamala Harris made a huge difference. And that is, I think, that actually sent a message to the entire Democratic Party that this is going to be the ticket. And this is also, you know, something that if you want to stop a second Trump term, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to do it joyfully. And we are going to be very defiant about it, you know, saying we aren't going back. And I think in Tim Walz, you have somebody who not many of us had really, I think, heard of him. I'm actually not sure if you had asked me 2 months ago if I could have named the governor of Minnesota, but now he has become, I think, somebody that we're all very familiar with. You know, I am from Texas. Uh, I grew up, you know, liking sports, so football was something that I knew. So you know, I recognize this former football coach here, and he seems to have just this really genuine connection to people. I think it's been pointed out, you know, in addition to being a social studies teacher and a coach on some of these teams, he also monitored lunch duty. You have to be a real people person to do lunch duty. So I think he just sort of goes along with, as we mentioned, the vibes. The vibes have been very good, and I think he just adds to the good vibes.
I want to stay on that before I play a soundbite from you of one of the speakers who I happen to know personally in former well, he's still a Republican, but Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, who spoke yesterday. I want to get your reaction on something from that. But the one thing that I wanted to ask you was on the Governor Walz part of this, because Tim Walz is very interesting to me because it's a guy who won a conservative leaning district when he was in Minnesota. He's a gun owner. He's a former football coach. He served in the military. That sounds Republican. If you truly just take a step back, he was endorsed by the NRA up until 2017, 2018, Jess. So, and I know you were just saying before, like a lot of people on the national stage maybe didn't know who Tim Walz was up until about maybe a month or two ago. So his profile, though, because you're blue dot in a red state, what do you make of somebody like that being deployed out for Democrats going forward, of somebody that can position themselves to say, look, I have the ideals that you have, and I grew up with this type of stuff. There's that viral video of him telling his daughter, and the daughter's like, I'm vegetarian. And he's like, we're going to
Oh, yeah.
eat turkey then. So like, those are things that I think are relatable to a person that would consider themselves conservative. What do you make of Walz being deployed and his message? And could Democrats use a figure like a Walz for future purposes to talk to more sensible Republicans?
I think so. And I think it also has really, you know, touched deeply on patriotism. You know, you've heard chants of USA throughout this entire convention. You know, last night when former members of his football team came out, wearing their old jerseys, maybe stretched out a little bit over the years for some of these guys, but that was almost something that I think you could have really easily seen at a Republican convention, a decade ago. And the fact that it's now happening for the Democrats, I think shows that they're really trying to message that, we are also, in addition to being the party of the coast and, the Sun Belt, we are also the heartland. We're the folks that, go to the county fairs. We are the folks that actually own guns, but really, do not, want sensible gun legislation so children don't live in fear of just attending school or concerts or malls. So I think that he has really, brought in a sense of just, we recognize this guy. I'm sure you had a teacher or coach at some point in your life that just really made a huge difference for you. And that seems to be exactly what Tim Walz does. And I also think, the love that he has from his family was very endearing. I know last night, I certainly in the United Center, when his son was very emotional and crying, and you said, "That's my dad." You know, everybody noticed that, and I think that's actually really gone viral, just out, out in out in the world now. So that I think is just like basically saying, like, you know what, we are actually the party that loves this country, and or the Democrats are saying that they, are the party that loves this country, that, we are the ones that believe in the ideals of what the country stands for.
So that's a perfect segue into Jeff Duncan's speech from last night, because I got asked this in a recent TV segment. I want to get your answer to it on the other side of playing this clip, because we saw Olivia Troy last night, Jeff Duncan, the Mesa, Arizona mayor, speak as well. So Republicans that have come to the DNC to speak, and they're saying things like this. So take a listen to this.
My journey started to this podium years ago when I realized Donald Trump was willing to lie, cheat, and steal to try to overturn the 2020 election. I realized Trump was a direct threat to democracy, and his actions disqualified him from ever stepping foot into the Oval Office again. I could spend my time revving up this crowd, but I'm certain I don't have to talk anybody out of voting for Donald Trump here. So I'm going to focus my attention on the millions of Republicans and independents that are at home, that are sick and tired of making excuses for Donald Trump. If Republicans are being intellectually honest with ourselves, our party is not civil or conservative. It's chaotic and crazy. And the only thing left to do is dump Trump.
So, Jess, he made a couple of good points there, and he goes on to say, it's time to dump Trump. But I'm curious for you twofold. One, what do you make of why Republicans like a Jeff Duncan, who have been steeped in the party politics at the local and state level in Georgia, are all of a sudden coming to the DNC because they don't feel a home? I know the answer to the question. It's the hold that Trump has on the party, but I'd love to hear it from somebody like you, who is on the ground there talking to some of these folks that have maybe come over and feel more comfortable at the DNC. And then the second part is, will it play with independents and Republicans, moderate ones that are at home, that are like, it is time to shift away American politics and discourse from what Trump and MAGA represents? What do you make of both things?
Yeah, so I think that when you have folks like the lieutenant governor of Georgia, making a speech at a Democratic convention, it really does sort of, I think, shine a light on how dangerous Trump is. I mean, this is clearly something that, I don't think came easy to him necessarily to, be so public and forthright about how he feels about the former president. But he saw firsthand what happened when in Georgia. This was somebody who did not accept the results of the 2020 election. He was trying to call a member of a lawmaker in that state to, find however many thousand votes they have. I think also, Duncan spoke about the threats his own family have received from members of his own party. And I think that just is a breaking point for him in terms of saying, I do not want this dangerous person back in the office, in the highest office in the world. And I will use, my voice. And if maybe one person in in my home state of Georgia, or maybe in Pennsylvania or Michigan, feel similarly, that might give them the courage to also, vote for a Democrat for the first time. And then in terms of independence, I think a lot of this convention actually has been, really telegraphing to folks that even if you are not a party affiliation and you maybe did like some of the things that Trump has said, even though the policy has always been a little light there, that there is a home for you. I mean, Oprah Winfrey had a surprise appearance last night, and she mentioned that she is a lifelong registered independent, and it was basically just time to cut the nonsense. So I think that is something that even goes along with as we were talking about the consequences of the Trump abortion bans. What would happen if a second Trump term comes? How extreme everything really is on the other side. So that seems to be themes that have been hitting on, and that I think the fact that these former Republicans are very welcome here. I think it goes to show too that on the Democratic side they understand that we have to appeal to folks who might not necessarily agree with everything in a party platform, but they see something, a higher calling for them in this upcoming election.
Yeah, you're right. And you're feeding into the follow-up perfectly, because the last thing I did want to ask you was, now, obviously, we're recording this as Vice President Harris is set to give her speech in just a few hours. But so we won't talk about her speech, but they are going to start obviously going on the campaign trail. We're hopeful that maybe there's a debate come September, either be on ABC News or on Fox News. We're going to find out about that. Hopefully they do debate, because we can actually hear both of them argue about policy positions. But what should, if Vice President Harris, or if somebody in the different rooms and circles that you've been traveling here in Chicago, ask you advice-wise, what are some things that the campaign should really focus in on from a policy perspective that you think will make the difference, not only in the battleground states, but with voters at large?
I think that a lot of what she talks about is bringing joy back. We've heard that word, and I've mentioned that before, joy, into this. And I think that's why you have seen this very euphoric feeling throughout the convention. And I think it's something that she wants to touch upon, that, we have had, gosh, 9 years of Donald Trump since he descended down that escalator, and it has been very chaotic. And I think a second Trump presidency would just exacerbate that. So I think that she's really, presenting herself as a stark contrast, that these are two very different visions of this country. The Democrats, people have been, extremely joyful. During the state roll call, you had, you had like all of these jubilacious parties, all the way from West Virginia down to Guam. And so like it shows just how I think people feel very, very strongly about electing her as a president. People we've gotten to know members of her family that we might not have known as much. We're really seeing, a side of her, prosecutor, attorney general, senator, vice president. So I think she's really making the case that, she has what it takes to be the commander in chief. And she also will, I think, maybe offer a little bit of breathing room for some Americans who just really are very, very tired of Donald Trump. And they kind of feel like, if he does not win in November. Now, I don't think he's going to go away, but, there will, I think, finally be a chapter that's closed.
Very well said. I don't think he's going away either, but you're right. You never know, right? And you never know, because look at what has happened over these last 7 or 8 weeks in American politics. I can't thank you enough, Jess, for hopping on the program. Check out all of Jessica's work over at the TexasSignal.com, the executive director. Continued success to you. Enjoy the rest of the convention and safe travels on your way home.
Great. Thank you so much.